Today we're going to look at tooltips, which are in many ways the most important part of any online diagram, because you can't get them on a page. This is how you create a tooltip. Let tooltip equal D3 select body. You always attach the tooltip to the body so that you have the full web page available to you. Append a div to the body. Give it an attribute of class tooltip, and style it with an opacity of 0 so that it's transparent, obviously. So we're going to be checking back and forth a lot to make sure that this works, because tooltips are complicated, and for the complicated stuff we check back and forth all the time. Launch the Fox, go to inspect, right click down at the bottom, inspect, and here is our code. And you see here under the SVG and our 150 data, you see that there's a new div, class tooltip, with an opacity of 0. Okay. Just shut down the terminal. Now you've noticed that I saved the plot itself as viz, and there's a reason for that. We're just going to log that viz to the console now, just to see what's in it. And it's made up of obviously quite a complex JavaScript object, but we're going to go through it. We go to console, reload, it's logged viz. This is viz here, and see it's an object, and it's an object that has a groups key that contains an array of 150 elements, which are obviously our irises. We look at the first element here and we see the details of the actual plot, but we also see that there's a data value here, and the data contains everything that is in our data set. We have species, sepal width and length, as well as petal width and length. So we can use that in order to create text for our tooltip, and that's what we're going to do now. We're going to create a function called tooltipText. That takes a parameter d, and it's going to return an interpolated string, so we use two backticks. And just here at the start, we're just going to put in what a guru I knew once used to call a minimum working model, or minimum viable model. So we're going to put in 3 values, which are species, d.species, d.petal length, d.petal width. So these are the vital measurements of our data set, and that's what this tooltipText function is going to return. Now, thing about a tooltip, what we think of as a tooltip isn't a tooltip. What we've called there a tooltip is where the tooltip appears. So the tooltip process is something that is chained to the viz object, and it changed the viz object according to mouse behavior, specifically 2 kinds of mouse behavior. When the mouse goes over it, we want it to do something, and the something is determined by 2 parameters, E and D. I just need to correct that, E and then D, and that'll return a function. Which will be to change the opacity of our tooltip. It's going to go from 0 to 0.9, so it's nearly solid. And then, as well as mouse over, we also want it to behave in mouse out. So when the mouse goes over it, we want the tooltip opacity to come up, and when we mouse off the iris point, we want the opacity to return to 0. So we save that, and then we go launch the Fox and take a look to see is it working. So So we go to inspect again, and there in the tooltip we see the opacity changing. Even though there's nothing else happening, we know that from looking at the code, we know that what we want to happen is happening. And again, it's very much a step-by-step thing with anything with these. Slowly and easy does it. So now we're going to call HTML on our tooltip object. We're going to load that HTML method with our tooltipText function. And now we're going to take a look at that. We reload the Fox, and you see that there's something has turned up. We open up the div, and we see the species, the petal length and the petal width, just like we asked. But why isn't it showing on the graph? Well, it is showing on the graph, it's not showing very well. So if you look down the bottom left hand corner, you can see it there. Now obviously that's not really where we want it to be. That isn't very useful. So we're going to give it coordinates. So we're going to go back to our code, and we're going to chain two style methods onto tooltip.html. The first style is going to give it a left value, E in this case. So remember, we use two arguments in the function. E stands for event, and the event has a method called pageX, which tells you where the x coordinate of the cursor is, and there's page Y, which tells you where the y coordinate is. So we're going to set this tooltip to appear according to where the mouse is, to identify where the mouse is and appear there. Now you see that our text is still appearing, but it's appearing down the bottom, and the reason for that is because there's a position aspect that we haven't filled in, and we're going to deal with that in the style sheet, which is where a lot of the tooltip magic happens. So you're going to set the position here to absolute, and absolute means that it will always appear in the same place. There's nothing relative to it. And here's our tooltip appearing now successfully where we want it. The only problem with the tooltip here is that it doesn't look very good. It's not easy to read or use. So we're going to spruce it up a little. We're going to give it a background of Alice Blue, which is the same as the background in the chart itself. We're going to set pointer events to none for safety's sake, because we don't want a whole load of events going off, trying to track them down, wondering what the hell they are. Life's too short. Okay, that's still working. And the next thing we do now is we're going to set a font property. So we're going to set the font to 12 pixels, and we're going to set it to sans serif. Just keep it straightforward. Take a look. This is all trial and error now, because I'm not sure is 12 big enough or too big or what. That's too small. So you go back, blow it up to 24. This is what you do, right? You double it, you have it, you double it, you have it. Back and forth. Okay, that looks reasonable. We'll stick with that. Try 18. Look, it doesn't really matter for this tutorial. It'll do. Okay, we're going to set the width of this of the tooltip to 120 pixels and the height to 70. Going to set a padding of 2 pixels. Go back, take a look, reload. Not really obvious what any changes that occurred, but the thing is still working, right? So that's something. We haven't broken it. But it lacks a little pop, so we're going to pop it by attaching a border. We're going to make it a solid border, 1 pixel, and make it black. So now when our tooltip appears, it's more distinct from the background. We're going to set a border radius to give it rounded edges, because nobody uses square edges. I mean, for God's sake, it's just isn't done. Okay, now we'll increase the padding by 5 or 2.5. A little better. Not going to sweat it. Is there anything else we need to do here? Well, one thing we could do is we need to improve the content a little, because it looks a little bare. So what we're going to have here is we're going to have some headings. So we identify the species as species, going to identify petal length as length, and we're going to identify petal width as petal width. Now, because we're using string interpolation and backticks, we can use hard breaks here in the string, and everything's going to be fine. It's also easier to read, you know, when you have a better idea looking at this of what it'll look like on the screen. And we'll throw in the sepal or sepal. I've never known, is it sepal or sepal? But whatever it is, we're going to throw it in. If it's there, it goes into the pot, same as Irish stew. Just change to a capital S here. Kill it, reload. Okay, we need a bigger box. So we'll increase the width here to 200, say, and the height to 125. See what that looks like. That's not formatted correctly. Go back. And we're missing a break. So just copy that down. And we'll get rid of species here at the top, because obviously it's the species. I mean, what else could it be? This might make it look a little tidier. And, you know, one last thing we'll do, we'll put species to uppercase to give it a bit of, to have it make an impression, right? We're giving it a top hat. So back in the Fox, reload it, hover. Okay, that looks better. It's not beautiful, but you know, you can work on it in time, and pretty it up a little where necessary. Okay, we're going to go back to the code, and back in the code, we'll just run over it, see everything's correct. And again, if I sound paranoid about any of this, it's because I am. There's so many little things, and JavaScript is so hard to debug. Okay, one thing that you might have noticed is that the appearance of the tooltip isn't very elegant. So what we're going to do is we're going to make it elegant by chaining a transition method onto tooltip. So it's tooltip.transition.duration. And we're going to give it a duration of 500 milliseconds, which is half a second, meaning that it will take the tooltip half a second to change its opacity from 0 to 9. And we're going to do the same for mouse out, so it's going to take it half a second to transition from an opacity of 0.9 to 0. And that will just make the whole experience just a little more aesthetically pleasing. Which sounds minor, it's not minor. None of these things are minor. Anything that adds the user experience is a good thing. kill it, reload it, give it a go, and you see there how the tooltip fades in a way that it didn't fade in before. So I think the last thing we need to do now is reduce the height of the tooltip, because it's just trailing a little. Yeah, that looks much better now. Okay, fantastic. So in the past 15 minutes we've learned how to make a tooltip work on a D3 scatter chart, which is far from trivial. Have a go yourselves at a different tooltip, different chart, different data set really, and see how you get on styling the tooltip, and just to get used to it. Next week we're going to do the axes, and that'll be that for the scatter charts. It'll be time then to move on to bar charts, and line charts, and all manner of other charts. So please like and subscribe to the channel. Live long and prosper.